And welcome to another episode of the Starting Lineup. I'm Arnav Sarkar alongside Kapil Nathan, and we've got another guest, Alec Crouthamel, also part of WRC Sports, and he does a few other things with rivals, and he recently started his own podcast called What's Chopping. So pretty exciting stuff. We're gonna talk to you and bring you the best in sports like usual. Talk about the recap the NBA draft, and then we'll get into some Rutgers recruiting stuff and some a preview of the upcoming football season, and make it more general, bring it to collegiate football perspective, which is always fun. So, and maybe even talk about some USFL, some baseball in there. We'll see what we have time for, but the NBA draft was on Thursday. Pretty exciting stuff. Obviously, Victor Wembanyama got picked first. Brandon Miller got picked second. Scoot Henderson got picked third. And there's a lot of good picks in there, top to bottom, but like what stood out to you guys the most?
I mean, it was obvious that Wembanyama was going to go first. And what stood out to me was Charlotte's selection of Brandon Miller. Obviously, they chose Team Fit over who is like a better player overall. I think that Scoot, as an Alabama fan, I think Scoot is a little bit, better overall, but Brandon Miller definitely deserved to go second. But I'm honestly more stunned by the fans' reaction because a lot of them wanted Scoot over Brandon Miller. And, that's honestly just, I meant, Scoot's a good player, but Brandon Miller is also a good player too. I don't know why you're chastising the franchise for choosing one good player over another.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
hmm Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I would say I agree with that. I mean, Brandon Miller, I mean, there's a reason he's a top three pick because he had a
Agree.
great season at Alabama. And I
Mhm.
definitely think a part of that was due to I know Shams Charania tweeted that like momentum was building for Scoot Henderson in a few hours before the draft. So I think that got a lot of fans' hopes up. And yeah, I thought that Scoot should have gone second, mostly because I mean I think he can play next to LaMelo Ball, and LaMelo Ball's been shown to have some injury concerns and
Injuries, yeah.
durabilities. So I think it could have gone either way. I would have picked Scoot, but I do think Brandon Miller will be a good NBA player.
Yeah, it always seemed to be that it was going to be Brandon Miller, and then I think right at the end, Scoot Henderson made a push, and they're both good players. I mean, I think Brandon Miller is a little bit better of a shooter, and Scoot Henderson's more athletic and getting to the rim. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Dame
Yeah.
Lillard and how he pairs with him, or if Dame Lillard decides to leave, go to Miami or Brooklyn, so or
Mhm.
anywhere else. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't think it was a bad pick either way. I mean, I could understand the argument for taking Scoot over Brandon Miller or vice versa. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think both teams ended up with prospects that were or two of the three best players in the draft behind Wembanyama. So I guess going down the draft board, the Thompson twins were selected fourth and fifth. The Nets
There's
had
no
three.
surprise
Oh,
there.
yeah.
They were clearly the best players after the top three, so I'm not surprised there at all.
Yeah, me neither. And I think it was really great that they got picked like right
Mhm.
after each other as like from a twin brother perspective. But they also did play really well, and I think they're going to be good fits with the Pistons and with the Rockets. And I think one of the guys who's really slid down the draft board was Cam Whitmore. I think he could have gone
Yeah.
quite a bit earlier, but he had also ended up going to the Rockets just in the 20th pick. And I know you know us Nets fans were wanting him to fall one more pick to like 21. So oh well, but I mean a good player. I think he had some struggles with his individual workouts and interviews based on what I was hearing, but I think he has a NBA ready game and he's gonna be able to contribute. He might be one of the steals at the draft at that position. And the Nets also had three draft selections in this draft, including Dariq Whitehead and Jalen Wilson and their other pick.
Noah
Oh, no,
Clowney, I
Clemens
believe.
from yeah.
Yeah.
I mean
He's a good
no
player. You guys,
Clowney from Alabama. Yeah.
yes, he's a good player. I meant like he's not like, anywhere on like Miller's level, but he is good.
Yeah, and I think what that pick really does for the Nets is like add size. I think the Nets really
Yes,
needed that, and
and
yeah.
it adds like not desperately, but like much needed size to the Nets.
Yeah, because they just had Nick Claxton, and to pair him with Nick Claxton's going to add some size in the post. I think that was really lacking in the Philly series
Mhm.
where Nick Claxton's going against Joe Embiid pretty much by himself.
Yeah.
And, Derek Whitehead coming off a little bit of some injury concerns, but I mean, he's really improved his game as a shooter. He can also be pretty athletic. And I like that pick as well. And then, Jalen Wilson kind of rounding it out from Kansas, so I'm a little bit slightly
Hmm.
undersized power forward. I
That
think
was a
that's
good
also
pick.
going to be a
Jalen
good team.
Wilson, Jalen Wilson's a national champion. That was a very good pick. I really
Mhm.
liked it. Um, I also really liked the other what really stood out to me was, I really like the Celtics draft strategy too. Um, Passing up on Marcus Sasser isn't something I would have done personally, but getting like, 4 second round picks that we can use to like trade up or, trade in a future year, that's a good idea. And I like the Jordan Walsh selection. It's not that he can definitely come in and be a good role player.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think so too. But Alec, I know you're also a Nets fan. What do you think about like those three picks? And is there anything else in the draft that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I thought I was pretty happy with the Nets draft. Like you said, adding Noah Clowney is going to give him some good size, and Claxton's specialty is being able to switch off and defend on the perimeter. He's really really good at that. Maybe lacks a little bit in size, like you said, but I think Clowney will definitely complement him pretty well. Maybe not on the floor at the same time, but in terms of the defensive scheme as a whole. And yeah, Derek Whitehead was one of the best players coming out of high school last year.
High
He
school,
definitely
he was a
dealt
number
with
one recruit. He was a
yeah,
number one recruit.
he dealt with a lot of injuries this year at Duke, but he still showed some flashes, and he's a definitely a longer guard, which I think is good. I mean, as a whole. And then yeah, Jalen Wilson, I mean, he put up numbers for a national championship team. I mean, there's not much more to say than that. And when you're drafting in the second round in like the 50s range, I mean, you want to get a lot of teams like to use them on international stashes, but my preferred strategy is to use them on proven winners in college who may not have the highest ceiling, but have that ability to contribute immediately. And one of the surprises in the draft, speaking of which, was that Trace Jackson Davis fell all the way to the second to
Yeah.
Oh
last
yeah,
pick
Hmm.
of the entire
yeah,
draft
and
to the Warriors.
him posting about it too. I mean, like
Yeah.
this is a player that was, very much in the conversation for best player. One of the best players in all of basketball last year, college basketball, and so falling all the way there, I don't get it. I mean, what happened?
Yeah, I guess his age and his size didn't. I guess it must not have appealed to teams as much as people thought. I think he did wonders for his draft stock this year by becoming so much more of a playmaker, bringing the ball up the floor for Indiana and having great passing vision. But yeah, I think the Warriors are a good fit for him. So I guess it's not always where you get drafted. It's not always where you get drafted in order. It's the team that you go to. So I think yeah, I think the Warriors are a good fit for him. But I was surprised that he fell so far.
Yeah, me too. I mean,
Hmm.
definitely
Yeah,
he fell all the way near the end of the draft, second last pick. The Warriors
and
are a good fit for him for sure.
he's on a team that has, some of the best coaching league wide, and he also has some very good playmakers around him. So he doesn't have to, be that day one contributor, but he can definitely grow into one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess he'll slightly undersized at his position, also a little bit of a smaller center, and also lacking, an outside game. I think that hurt him a little bit, but I certainly did not expect him to fall anywhere near that far. And then I guess other guys, that kind of, I thought were really good picks was, I think Hawkins Jr. was a really good fit for the Heat. I like what the Nuggets did, getting, Julian
Yeah,
Strawther. I think that was a good pick, and yeah, I mean. I don't know. A lot of the second round guys, I think they fell to good teams. They might not
yeah.
have the accolades,
I
but
really
they
like,
went to the
I
right
really
teams.
liked
Yeah.
a lot of these second round picks. They were, these are good players that we definitely know about, like that a lot of people know about in college. So all of them were good picks.
Mm. Yeah, and like Jalen Pickett going to the Nuggets, I think that was really good. And Seth Lundy also from Penn State going to the Hawks, that could be an interesting pick. So there's like a lot of those second rounders that I was like, they might not have had like the accolades of the first round talent, but
But they're still damn
they
good
could be really
players.
good players, like Isaiah Wong going to the Pacers. I think that was another interesting one. So I mean, yeah, I mean it was a pretty solid pretty solid draft. I mean, not too many surprises in the beginning, and then towards the end, we started to see a few more surprises. And just wanted to give a shout out to a Rutgers guy who got drafted or didn't get drafted, but got signed to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Caleb McConnell, one of the best defensive players in the country. Really happy for him, and I hope he follows in the footsteps of Ron Harper Jr. in the NBA. And I think that the Thunder is a good team for him to go to. I mean, they have a lot of young talent like Chet Holmgren and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey. And he might have an opportunity there because, he's also like going to be able to contribute as a young guy. And maybe he can, you know, get, find his way into a two-way contract and, possibly get some playing time on the higher level.
Yeah, I think he was a top 5, I would say, defender, especially on the perimeter in this class. And it's all about that jump shot. And apparently he worked out for about 20 or so teams. And apparently that jump shot has been looking better. He didn't have the best much it'll translate to the NBA since, he was at his best when he was kind of backing down a smaller guy in a mismatch in isolation situations. But, I don't know how much that's going to translate to the NBA. But I mean, his defense is NBA ready. Absolutely. He's got great hands, great speed, great lateral quickness, and he just walls guys up. And there's not much to say other than he's an elite defender in almost every facet.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we both saw it there at his time at Rutgers, and if he could take his offensive level to, even an average offensive player and work on that jump shot, I think he could be, at least a bench player like in the NBA. He can get some minutes. He can really contribute, especially as the Thunder continue to get better, stack draft picks, and they start to put those players on the court. So I mean, the Thunder definitely an up and coming team, and also a team where I feel like he'd actually be able to get an opportunity and not just sit on the bench for years. So I mean, I'm happy. I think it's a good fit, and obviously, he's a good player, and I'm happy because as a Rutgers student and fan, like I think it's a great opportunity for him. And speaking of Rutgers, I know you're pretty involved with a lot of different things. You're part of the Riot Squad and WRC Sports, and but tell us what you do a little bit with Rivals and what you've been seeing lately with Rutgers recruiting. I guess we could start with basketball and then also football as we get ready for the football season.
Yeah, so I joined the Night Report, which is I guess the Rutgers Rivals site. So I've been doing things, I've been writing stuff about, Rutgers football and basketball and also recruiting, not even just for Rutgers, but recruiting as a whole. So it's pretty interesting to see how the recruiting goes, from like a covering it standpoint. The 24 class for Rutgers football is definitely looking pretty good. There's been ups and downs. Like last week, they lost Judah Pruitt to Boston College. He was a 3-star lineman. I think he was going to start on the defensive side, but he was coming out of high school as an offensive tackle. But there have also been some ups. They unfortunately lost Josiah Brown, a 4-star out of Erasmus Hall, to Penn State yesterday. But they've also gotten some wins in that end too. They got Aris Bethea, a defensive lineman out of Erasmus Hall. There's been a huge Erasmus Hall to Rutgers connection. Greg Schaum's done a great job of, finding that connection and getting a lot of guys from there, even in the transfer portal too. I mean, Aaron Cruikshank went to Erasmus Hall, went to Wisconsin,
Right.
then came back to Rutgers. And another one to look out for is Corey Duff, the wide receiver / tight end. It's reportedly down to Miami and Rutgers, but or North Carolina and Rutgers. Miami was making a later push. But apparently it's looking good for Rutgers, and I believe he's committing next week. So that's something to look out for. In terms of basketball, I mean, everyone knows that Rutgers is going after Dylan Harper. I think they're still in the lead right now. He pushed his commitment date back. It was supposed to be after the Peach Jam Invitational, which was going to be around the week after July 4th. But his schedule is so stacked right now. He made the USA under-19 national team. So he is out of the country for that World Cup for the next week and a half or so, I think. And the day before Peach Jam, he gets back from that. So his schedule is completely stacked. I believe he's going out to Vegas to train with Ron in the summer league, his older brother, Ron Harper Jr. And then he's doing even more stuff. I think he's doing some workout with like Chris Paul or something. So his schedule is completely stacked. I don't blame him at all for pushing it back. And I don't think it hurts Rutgers too much either. I mean, he still has visits to take, and he still wants to take those visits. But I still think Rutgers, because he has that familiarity with them, is in a good spot. But for guys committed, obviously Ace Bailey could be, the crown jewel of this entire class. Bryce Dortch is a high ceiling wing, very, very good defensively. I've heard some compare him to, I guess, a more polished Mawat Mag. So that would be pretty cool to see. And then Lathan Somerville, the center, he has potential to be, potential stretch 5 too, which would be pretty big. Something that Rutgers hasn't really seen, even if Cliff Amori, who's currently there, is trying to, open up his offensive game. Lathan Somerville already kind of has that coming in. So that would be very interesting to see. I'm not expecting Cliff to return next year. But yeah, it feels like it'll be a 4-man class for the Scarlet Knights. At least that's what it looks like now. So Rutgers football and basketball recruiting are definitely looking up.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And if they do land Dylan Harper to pair with Ace Bailey, that would be the number 1 and 2 recruits in the entire class. So that would pretty much lock up that number 1 spot in the entire country, which I think would be really cool. I mean, obviously this year, Gavin Griffiths is coming in. I think he's going to be absolutely huge. He could probably start right away. Definitely a great shooter and scorer in his own right. And he's going to be the highest recruit at the time. So I mean, Rutgers basketball definitely looking up. So many other guys coming as well. And I guess back to football. I was kind of like listening to what that interview that you did with Mike and Richie, and you guys were talking about the receivers. Like I kind of wanted to get your take on what do you think's gonna how do you think Jaquay Jackson and Nas Brantley and Sean Bowman, how do you think they're gonna have an impact on the team this year, and what do you see the Rutgers offense looking like for next season?
I think it'll be a little bit slow at first because, not only bring in 3 transfer guys to complement your quarterback, bring in 3 transfer guys from lower levels. Sean Bowman and Nassim Brantley are from the FCS level. Bowman comes from Maine and Brantley comes from Western Illinois. And then Jaquay Jackson is transferring up from D2, I believe it was California University in Pennsylvania. But I do think Jaquay Jackson has the skills to be a number 1 wide receiver. He definitely showed it last year. He had over 1,300 yards. So I think it's going to be a little bit slow at first. But I do think as the season goes on, they'll get better and better, which is definitely a good thing because as the season goes on, the schedule gets harder.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that'll definitely help, especially with Gavin Wimsatt and the new offensive coordinator, Kirk Shiraka. Apparently, he is building an offense that is going to emphasize running the ball and also tight ends. So getting Bowman from Maine was huge because, I mean, Johnny Langan, this is no knock on him. I don't think he is a Big Ten caliber tight end 1, but as a tight end 2, he's fantastic. I mean, he can do pretty much everything on the offensive end. He can block, he can run. He even played some fullback type for Rutgers last year. He can even play quarterback every now and then. So I think as a complementary weapon, aside from Sean Bowman, who's more of a direct receiver, he has great hands. I think that tight end room will be a strength for the Scarlet Knights because they added a guy, and the wide receiver room as well, adding Brantley and Jackson, who are 2 very skilled guys from lower levels. So yeah, I think we'll see an improved Rutgers offense, and I think the X factor is the offensive line because they dealt with some ineffectiveness and inexperience last year. So with another year, we'll see how they fare to give Wimsatt and the running back some time.
Yeah, I mean, I like what I'm seeing with Brantley Jackson, Sean Bowman, who's a big target tight end type player who can really go up and get those passes, and then in the running game with Sam Brown, we expect him to be healthy for this season. I really like what I was seeing from him last season. So on top of the running game, if Rutgers could also have a really good passing game, I guess it'll be really up to Gavin Wimsatt. And if the offensive line's also good, it's going to really be a big year, hopefully, for Gavin Wimsatt. I mean, he had a lot of games towards the end of last season where he got reps and against real higher end Big Ten competition, including games against Michigan, Penn State, and Michigan State, the likes of those guys. So hopefully, this is the year that Gavin Wimsatt takes a jump. I mean, with the weapons around him. And I mean, the defensive side of the ball, I think Rutgers looks pretty good. Obviously, both offense and defense are replacing players. Defense was more of their strength last year. How do you see the defense shaping up to be for this year?
Yeah, like you said, the defense is definitely going to be the strength, especially the defensive line. They didn't exactly show it all that great in the sack numbers, but I mean, guys like Aaron Lewis lived in the backfield. Wesley Bailey led the team with 3.5 sacks last year, but I think Aaron Lewis is poised for a big year, especially the work that Marquise Watson has done, not only in the coaching but in the recruiting. I mean, he's probably one of the most important, at the very least, position coaches, maybe even assistant coaches on the entire team, the way that he's built up that unit. So I think Aaron Lewis is due for a big year. I saw a stat at the end of last year that said, I believe it was there were two players in the country with an 85 or better rush defense grade and pass rush grade, and that was Aaron Lewis and Will Anderson. We know where Will Anderson is now. He's with the Texans, so that's pretty high praise. So I think the defense is on the back end, on the in the secondary, they lost some pieces, especially at safety. They lost Avery Young and Christian Izzian as they were seniors, but the cornerback room got another year of experience. Max Melton has legit NFL tools, and the linebacker core is also getting some experience back after it was a little thin last year. So I think the Rutgers defense is in for a pretty good year. And as long as the offense can continue to hold up and be at the very least an average Big Ten offense, I think the defense is really going to show out this year because, I mean, coming into the first month and a half of the season last year, they were ranked in at least the top 25 or top 10 in yards allowed per game. But the problem was the offense, couldn't stay on the field. So the defense was always on and getting more and more tired. And eventually, the floodgates kind of open. So if the offense can stay on the field and the defense, has its time to rest up and get ready for the next position, I think this defense could really show out as one of the better units of the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see that as a Rutgers fan. I think they can too. It's their strength, and they have a lot of players returning back, and it's good to see the offense getting better. I mean, this could shape up to be a pretty good season. Obviously, Adam Corsack's leaving, so Flynn Appleby's going to be coming in handling punting duties. Jude McAtemi set to handle kicks. At least for this season. I know we also have some other recruits in there like Jay Patel, so it's going to be an interesting special teams unit as well. But I think that kind of brings us to where do you think the record's going to be? I've talked about it on crew before. I mean, I kind of see them at 6-6, but that's if everything goes right. I think the two big games are Michigan State and Indiana. I think if they and also I guess also Virginia Tech. I think Michigan State and Virginia Tech are going to be the two hardest games to win that they could win, and if they can beat obviously Wagner Temple, Indiana and Northwestern to get to 4, and they're able to play their best game, beat Virginia Tech at home, beat Michigan State at home for homecoming. I think that's where they get 6 wins. Anything more than that, I think would be a little bit of a stretch. I mean, Gavin Wimsatt have to really play out of his mind and be on the next level to really give the team a chance to upset even like a Maryland or an Iowa. But yeah, just want to get your thoughts on where you see this team's record for this season.
Yeah, I think you're on point with everything that you just said. I mean, the Northwestern game is going to be very intriguing early on because, I mean, Northwestern alternates between winning 2 games a year and going to the Big Ten championship.
Yeah.
So they won 1 game last year. So who knows what they're in for this year. But if we count that as a winnable game, then that's 1. And the second game of the season is Temple. Now, they struggled against Temple last year, but that was mostly due to the offense struggling. I think that's a win. Even if Temple made it close last year, that's going to be the blackout game. Always a great environment at the blackout games at Rutgers.
It's a lot of fun, yeah.
Virginia Tech, like you said, is going to be a tough game. That's another Power 5 opponent, so it's going to be a close one. We'll see if Rutgers can pull it out at home. That's going to be the Scarlet Out game that next weekend. So that would put them at 3-0 if they win all those games. And then Wagner, there's not much else to say about Wagner other than if you don't win by 50, it's considered a disappointment. So it should be 4-0, and then Indiana.
Michigan's the week before Wagner,
Yeah.
so I guess it'll probably be 4-1, but yeah.
So you'll get a nice rest up after going to the big house to play Wagner. And like you said, that Indiana game is going to be very interesting. I don't think they really got much better, and they were not good last year. So I think that's a win for Rutgers. Last time they went out to Bloomington, they won by 35. So I think that's looking good in Rutgers' favor. And then, that Michigan State game for homecoming is going to be the key because Greg Schiano has sort of figured out Mel Tucker, I guess, in the first game of Greg Schiano's Rutgers 2.0 tenure. They forced 7 turnovers and won by double digits at Michigan State. And last year, I mean, it was a close game. Rutgers ended up losing by a touchdown thanks to a big touchdown by Shameed Jones with a minute left that put him in that position. And I think that Michigan State took a step back. They lost their starting quarterback and one of their starting wide receivers to the portal, especially later on in the portal, I guess, time. So I think they take a step back, and I think Rutgers takes a step up, and I think they win that game. So I believe that puts them at 6. So, and then
Yeah,
the November schedule is kind of brutal. You have Ohio State, which I mean, Ohio State speaks for itself. Then
right.
you go to Iowa, and that's never an easy environment. Especially, I mean, if Iowa fields their usual dominant defense, and then you go out to Penn State, which again is never easy. Um, Even playing Penn State at home is never playing Penn State in general is never
Yeah,
easy.
it's a tough matchup for us for sure.
And
For a lot of teams.
especially, yeah, especially if Penn State, moving on from Sean Clifford to Drew Aller, especially if he's
Oh,
the
they're
real
gonna get
deal.
better next year, and we'll
Yeah,
talk about that in the next segment when we do some big, general predictions. But yeah, anyway,
yeah,
finish up with the
and
Maryland
then yeah, and then they come home on senior day to face Maryland, and Maryland is always going to be an interesting matchup because they have a lot of talent. It just feels like sometimes they don't exactly live up to that talent, but in past years against Rutgers, they definitely have. They've won by at least
Yeah.
20. So that's going to be a very interesting matchup, especially if Talia Tagovailoa comes back. I believe he's coming back, and performs as he did last year against Rutgers. So I think you're right on with 6-6, and that would be, I think, a success making a bowl game this year.
Yeah, I think so too. That's pretty good schedule prediction. I mean, those last four are going to be tough. I guess the story once again is if they could somehow get to 6-2, I'm sure everything will be feeling really good. I mean, even if the opponents aren't most spectacular, they might not be ranked, but like a bowl game and a 6-2 record is just going to be absolutely stunning. But then the next four are going to be pretty hard. And it would be a surprise even if they were to even beat one of those teams, even Maryland. So if they fell all the way to 6-6, made a bowl, they have a month off, plenty of time to regroup. So possible bowl win. Even if not, they make another bowl. This time was actually 6 wins as opposed to the 5 from the Gator Bowl a few years ago. But I mean, yeah, I think that'd be a success. I think that'd really get this team on the right direction. Then as maybe, time goes by, they can start looking for, 7, 8 wins as the recruiting classes continue to get better. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much what I also see for Rutgers football. Um, Kind of going into like general college football. I kind of wanted to get you guys your thoughts on like which four teams do you think would make the college football playoff? I guess we could start there because that's always a fun one to try to predict this early.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy to predict this early. I mean, you have to pencil in Georgia since they're always going to be in it no matter what, and they're just a dominant team. They've won the last two national championships. Um, yeah, it's just not easy to predict this far out. I
Yeah,
don't know. I don't know if Michigan takes a step back or not. After a college football playoff run last year, TCU, it feels like they're going to take a step back. They lost a lot of contributors, and yeah, I don't think they'll make it back, unfortunately. USC will be very interesting to watch because I mean a Pac-12 team hasn't made it into the playoffs since I believe Washington in 2016. So that'll be very interesting to watch. Caleb Williams should be probably the Heisman favorite again this year. Um, but yeah, those teams, Ohio State is always going to be there, even if they lost CJ Stroud and they're bringing in a new quarterback. They're always going to be in there. I mean, they have Marvin Harrison Jr., one of the best wide receivers in the entire country. Let's see, a Big 12 team, I guess. Who's going to win the Big 12? I don't know. It's very
good
easy. It's
question.
not very easy to predict these things early on.
Yeah,
And I
I
mean, of
don't
course,
think
Alabama's
I
going to be in
don't
there too.
I don't
yeah,
think,
sure they will.
personally, I don't think that there's gonna be another thing like last year. I personally think that it's gonna be, well, we know who's gonna be the 1 seed. I think we know that. And then I think hmm, yeah, it's gonna be our friends from the East, unfortunately. It's gonna be us, and then the other two spots I'd put up for grabs, really. I just don't know.
Yeah,
Michigan, I guess.
probably Michigan. Maybe whoever wins the Big Ten will definitely get
Michigan,
one. Yeah,
Michigan, Ohio State, winner, and then maybe USC.
could be. Yeah. I'd probably go with something similar. I mean, I'd take Georgia at 1. I mean, until anyone can prove otherwise. I mean, they seem like a really dominant team, and also they have a soft schedule this year, so I
But the
really
problem is,
expect
yeah,
them to
the
go on
problem
a
is they
win.
lost. They did lose a lot of players, though.
They did, but they also
Some
did they also
top,
did last
some.
year. So I mean, that's I don't
No,
know.
they
We'll
didn't lose.
see.
They didn't lose as many this year as they did last year. They didn't lose as many last year as they did this year. This year was,
This year's even
um,
more.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, we'll see. I mean, I still would say they'd probably even be in with like with a loss. Whether that's the SEC championship game, maybe they probably wouldn't be the one seed, but I would still say they could definitely get in. And I don't really see them like maybe they lose to Tennessee, like maybe they probably won't. Maybe they lose to Alabama if it gets that far in the SEC championship game. They'll probably be in. So I don't know where your seeding is, but I'll put them in. For argument's sake, I'll just throw them in the one for now. And then, I feel like Michigan with JJ McCarthy and Blake Corum, like you saw what happened last year with Donovan Edwards, and without Blake Corum, I think Michigan's probably gonna end up winning the game again. Um, so they're probably gonna whoever wins the Big Ten, I'm gonna slot in Michigan. So Georgia, Michigan. Um, yeah, I don't see like Alabama missing a back-to-back year. So for argument's sake, I'm gonna put
They've
them
never
in.
done it. They've
Yeah,
never done it,
so I'll
and
probably put them in the playoff, like maybe at four, because maybe they lose one if Georgia's that dominant or something like that. And then yeah, maybe like USC gets that third spot. It could be like a team like Texas if they somehow are just done Alabama, or even if not, and if they otherwise win out. If they win the Big 12, I mean, I think things are looking up for them. They could really have a chance to win the Big 12 in their final year before they move to the SEC with Oklahoma. And yeah, so I mean, that'd probably be mine, but I'd probably go with USC though. I mean, in their last year before moving to the Big Ten. So either way, pretty interesting. I mean, it is kind of early to try to predict this kind of stuff, but I mean, yeah, those are kind of like I guess my picks in terms of the Big Ten. I mean, like I said, I think Michigan's probably the best team. Ohio State's probably still going to be pretty good, but they might take a slight step back with Common Core instead of CJ Stroud. For Penn State, this is where it gets really interesting with Drew Aller because if they can't like beat Ohio State or Michigan this year, like you know what I mean, like maybe not Michigan, but like at least Ohio State, they've got to really win one of those two games to really take the next step. And I feel like this is their best chance to beat the Buckeyes, probably like in a long time, maybe like I don't even know, like I don't know about ever, but in a long time because with Ohio State with CJ, I mean, with CJ Stroud gone, with Kyle McCord, if Drew Aller really is all that good and the team is all that good, and they are, I mean, they're right there, but they're still a bit behind in terms of talent. But if this year if they can't close the gap this year, then they might not be able to. So I'm just gonna put it that way. I'm not gonna like say that like they have to or they will necessarily, but I mean, they definitely could. So I feel like that's kind of where things get interesting. And then those three are always top three teams like in the Big Ten East. And it's going to be interesting to see going forward with all this realignment. Texas, Oklahoma joined the SEC, USC, UCLA joined the Big Ten. No divisions are in a lot of these conferences. So we're going to have the two best teams in the conference championship. So, NIL is really growing. So college football is like really changing. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys have any like further thoughts on any of that, but it's kind of just how I feel about the whole, college football in general. Things are getting a lot more exciting now.
One team I would look out for this year is definitely Wisconsin. I think they made a great hire, and actually, I was surprised that they managed to get Luke Fickell away from Cincinnati. I thought
Yeah.
the only job he would ever take is Ohio State, but good on them for getting him. They didn't completely retool the roster, but they did a lot. They got a new quarterback, and they also got a new offensive coordinator, and Phil Longo from North Carolina runs a great offense. And that's who I wanted for the Rutgers job. Honestly, he's a New Jersey guy too, so he has some connections there. I think Wisconsin's going to take a big step forward next year, and they might even be in contention for a playoff spot, honestly.
Wow. See, yeah, that I didn't see, but I mean, them winning the West, I could definitely see that at the very least, and I mean, maybe even fighting, whoever wins the Big Ten in the East in the Big Ten championship game. So we'll see if they can, seriously like make a run at them in that game, then yeah, I mean the playoff spot is up for grabs if they have a great record. But I mean I do like Luke Fickell and what he did with Cincinnati taking them to the playoff. I think he's gonna be a great hire. Wisconsin is usually one of the top teams in the West. Let's see if they can get back there. But you know, to close out the show, Kapil, I know you're mentioning some stuff about the USFL and the playoffs. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
yeah, the playoffs are tomorrow, and I think so tomorrow and Sunday with the championship next week. Um, Other than that, I honestly am supporting my Birmingham Stallions, so I think we'd have a good win. Um, Other than that, the Panthers, I think, and the Pittsburgh Maulers are battling it out in the North. That's an interesting matchup. You have the best defense versus a team that's, been on and off. So I think this championship game is going to come down to the Stallions and the Pittsburgh Maulers.
Hmm.
And I have
Yeah,
the
that's
favorites as the Stallions. They're just, they have an MVP player in quarterback Magoo, and their defense is like, if it's not best, it's second best, and that's perfectly fine. I mean, like, Pittsburgh has struggled to move the ball all season long, but I think we can manage to, beat them if, we have the better players, we have the better roster, and we have a better coach. So fully believe that we'll be repeating as back-to-back champions.
yeah. Well, that's pretty awesome. Yeah,
Mhm.
USFL is always fun. I guess one more thing before we leave. I know you have the Alabama hat on. What do you see out of Alabama this season? I know we kind of talked about it briefly, but do you have like a season prediction as to like where they're going to be?
I don't think anybody should be, surprised that, I mean, it's clear there's a lot of talent that was lost last year, a lot of transfers, and then you have like two guys who really should have gone 1 and 2, really, this last year in the draft. Losing like two guys like that, it is painful. But we have a great recruiter in Coach Nick Saban, and he knows what to do with players that are coming right out of high school. He knows how to use them correctly. We've got I think one of the best 5-star edge who's been compared to Will Anderson. And if you're comparing anybody to Will Anderson, I mean they're comparing him to Derek Thomas. Derek Thomas and Von Miller, the two Hall of Famers right there. So if you can get players like that, you're gonna automatically be pretty successful. And I think that's what's gonna happen this year. Are we gonna get like, national championship out of this team? Too early to tell. Is it possible? Oh, for sure. You have to consider this team until at least, until somebody proves otherwise, one of the top 3, 4 teams to win the title. Last year it was, TCU, they got a lot of flack for, losing by 50 points plus in the national championship game. They might have deserved their way there, but Alabama, they wouldn't have lost by 50 to Georgia. They would have they would have made it close at least. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, no,
So
I think so. I think so too. It's gonna be a good year for the Tide and hopefully for Scarlet Knights. But that's about all the time we have. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.